Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of the show, bringing another really awesome guest for you today. On the show today, we have the honor of being joined by Susie Singer Carter, who is a multiple award-winning filmmaker, writer, director, producer, actor, and nationally recognized caregiver advocate whose work lies at the intersection of very important storytelling as well as social impact. Susie first captured international attention with her Oscar-qualified short film, My Mom and the Girl, starring Valerie Harper in her final performance, which was a deeply personal story born from Susie's own caregiving journey. And from there moving on to writing and producing Bratz the Movie, to co-producing Soul Surfer. Susie has really navigated Hollywood at every level, but it's really her advocacy-driven work that's become really her defining voice. She is also the creator and host of two podcasts, the award-winning Love Conquers All, and also she serves as the host of Third and Fairfax, which is for the Writers Guild of America West. And most recently, which we'll be talking about today, Susie wrote, directed, and produced the documentary No Country for Old People, recipient of the 2024 Gold Anthem Award for Health Awareness. And the film is really a searing examination of nursing home neglect, systemic healthcare failures, and ultimately the human cost of institutional indifference, a subject that she knows not just as a filmmaker, but also as a daughter who lost her mother to Alzheimer's. A lot to get into today. Really honored to have with us Susie Singer Carter. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is a lovely platform, and I'm really appreciative of any platform where I can talk about this issue that we're facing as a country.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I look forward to discussing a lot of these topics with you. Let's start off, though, just by, obviously we're going to be talking, but I would love for you to talk just a little bit about your mother, Norma. I mean, an amazing young opera prodigy, just to open up the film with, having her own, network back on, I think, ABC, and when she was 16, Capitol Records journey. I mean, tell us all about Norma. I mean, she's just an amazing person and has her own amazing story. Take us down that path first, if you will.
Oh, okay. I appreciate that. Yeah, my mom was a pistol. She was just, a force and one of a kind. And like you said, she started singing opera at 5 years old. She became an auteur and studied with the most prestigious opera teacher in New York. Would take the bus with her mom, and by 9 was doing, she was doing her own shows, and then by 16 she had her own radio show in New York, and where she was, singing. And then by the time she was 16, her family moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, and so when she was going to school here in Los Angeles, she was also, singing gigs at night on wherever she could get them. So she met my dad, who was also very, very prominent in the music industry, but he happened to be playing trumpet at night. And so she was the singer in this one gig that she had at Shelley's Manhole, which was Shelley Mann, the drummer of the time, who was like this really very, very famous drummer, and he had his own club on Sunset Boulevard, and so it began, their relationship, my mom and dad, and both of them were very, very musically inclined, but with their own geniuses, really, because my mom had such a gorgeous voice and such a tool it was amazing, and she did get signed with Capitol Records, and then they wanted to put her on the road, and it's so emblematic of my mom because when she found out like how long going on the road meant and who you'd be spending your days with at that point in her life, she was like, this is from her mouth. All these people are heroin addicts. I'm not going on the road with them, right? And so she could care less. And I always asked her, like, why did you give? How could do you regret giving up your career? Because she had such a gift. And she said, "What? I don't care." She said, "I can sing. Who cares? I can sing." And I'm always, she always sang. Music was really the language in our household. And my dad, and she helped support my dad's career, which was basically creating the state-of-the-art recording equipment. He was responsible for the transition from mono to stereo and on and on and on. So he's very much in our history books and legendary. So the two of them were meant to meet and meant to bring some good stuff to the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And your mother, Norma becomes diagnosed initially with Alzheimer's. You become her primary caregiver, and it's interesting because as I mentioned in the bio, you made the film back 10 some odd years ago, My Mom and the Girl with Valerie Harper, on that particular part of the caregiving journey. Now, obviously, the caregiving journey we'll get into in terms of No Country for Old People was much different. But talk a little bit about this time because aside from being a full-time primary caregiver, you're making films, you start the podcast as well to talk about it. Say a couple words about this because this is, obviously a very important piece of your story. And, we talk a lot about the sort of the sandwich generation, this concept of, these people like us both that have had to take care of not just our own kids, but our parents, and it becomes a very unique situation. Take us back to 2016 in that period, if you would.
Sure. And I want to just share this with you. I just heard a new term, which is now we're now called the club sandwich
Ah,
generation.
I
And
know
that
that
makes
one.
so much sense, right? Because we're living longer, so there's a lot more generations. And so, and oftentimes that's what we're dealing with. So, yeah, no, when someone's diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia, we don't get a book. We don't know what to do. You go to the doctor's office with your mom and you find out that she can't draw the clock and put the arms in, where the numbers should be, and your heart sinks. And they go, well, she's got mild cognitive, degeneration, which is, basically the beginning of Alzheimer's. And you're sent on your way. You're not given an instruction book. You don't know what to do. And so I made every mistake in the book. And my mom was one of my best friends. I just loved her so much. And I told her straight away, we got this. Like no one else in the world is really trying. We're going to get this. Like I thought I had these delusions of grandeur that I was going to find the cure for her and, just hang in there. And of course, you're defeated very quickly and you realize that you have no power against this beast. And so but I tried everything wrong. And I put it in the documentary too, because I want people to see what the mistakes that you make. You think, oh, if I just keep testing her, I'm going to keep testing her and go, where are you? Who am I? What's that? Who's that? And God bless her. She'd go, I don't know. She would and she always did it with humor. And I cringe looking at that. And then I was going through a divorce. My stepfather died, and I was moving from my house that I lived in into this live work loft situation in Hollywood. And I took my mom in because she was having Groundhog's Day. Where's George, my stepdad? And I'd say, Mommy, he passed away. What? Nobody told me. And so I said, Mom, you were there. Anyway, so I just thought that I can't let her go through this on her own. So I moved her in with me, and I was so worried about, oh my God, what did I just do? Because it's basically like living in a studio when you live in these work live lofts, and you have parkers, and a lot of people's garage aren't their garage, it's their office. So my mom, who's very social, and now her filter is even less, and she's off and running, she's going everywhere. And I was so worried that I was going to get evicted, or she's just bothering people. I didn't know. And lo and behold, everyone embraced her. Everyone became a community there, and they just loved her. And she ended up recording with this group that lived next door to us. She ended up being in their music video. And when she finally had to move into memory care, everyone missed her. Everyone. So we had a caregiver that stayed with us 24/7, who was my daughter's nanny. So she knew my mom so well, and she also helped my mom keep her, housekeeping with her house. She became my mom's best friend, and she moved in with us. And every day she'd regale me with these stories of my mom, who talked to everybody. I mean, she spent the afternoon at Starbucks with Snoop Dogg one day. Like, they're
Nice.
gone for like 4 hours. I'm like, where are you guys? Well, Susie, Snoop Dogg is talking to your mom, and she's singing. He wants to take her on the road. I'm like, oh, what is going on? My life is crazy. So she came home and told me this story that was just so gorgeous and so beautiful. And it really, it really, it really illustrated the gifts that you get in every situation, and how these three disparate women who would have never met had it not been for their diversity at the moment, and affected each other's lives in such a positive way, in such a simple way, and but such a profound way. And I thought that was so valuable to share. And so, because I thought at first, everyone said, you've got to do a film on that story. It's so beautiful. And I said, just what everyone needs is another Alzheimer's movie. Nobody wants to hear about it. And I just decided to do it. And it was so embraced. We were Oscar qualified. We went to Cannes. We won the PBS Fine Cuts Award. People embraced it from all different generations. And I thought, wow, that's so powerful storytelling. It's so powerful to show, to be raw, not to be exploitative, not to be like that, but to be raw, and people will see themselves, and it will resonate. Even if they're not going through that problem, it will hit their heart. And if you touch people's heart, and if you can manage to make them laugh, which we did, I brought in as much humor as I could. It became a joyous look at Alzheimer's. So that's why I did that, and that's why I continued. I wanted to continue the conversation, and that's why I launched Love Conquers Alls, which is our podcast. And that's how that came about. And yeah, and which actually was the impetus, or my justification for being able to do this documentary that we're going to talk about.
Mm-hmm. And one other thing I just want to ask you about, because you bring it up in the new film, but it sort of touches the period before. And there's this one segment where you talk about, hey, while you're taking on this role as caregiver, and your relationship is changing with your mother, and it's not mother-daughter anymore, right? It's different. Your relationship with other people is changing, and you were pointing out, maybe people aren't coming by as much as they used to. Maybe family members, their job is a little difficult. Maybe they don't want to help out as much. And so, can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's something that we've touched on, as mentioned, on some of these other club sandwich shows that we've done, and maybe some personal experiences have been the exact same. Single words, but I think that's something maybe a lot of people don't understand. Sort of think that everyone's going to come to the table and everyone's going to have about friends, family, but you're kind of on your
Kumbaya, my
own.
Lord, kumbaya does not always
Yeah,
happen. It
yeah.
doesn't. And it it's really shocking when you really need your community, or your family, and oftentimes people can't show up, and you don't know why, but they just don't. And so often caregiving falls into one person's responsibility, and too often. And I remember when it first was starting, I have one sibling, and he just could not step up. There's a lot of denial. You're over exaggerating. She doesn't really have that problem. Or then it becomes, well, she's not going to remember anyway. Who cares? So all the cliches that would become, in the forefront so that it justifies their decision and makes them feel okay about being absent. And so at some point you have to cut your losses and go, okay, then I'm the one, I'm the chosen one. What's been doing this podcast about Alzheimer's for 5 years now, 6 years now, I hear these stories so much, and the truth is that some people just cannot do it. They're not cut out for it. They're not made for it. They can't do it. And if you force them to, they wouldn't do a good job. And sometimes you just have to accept that you're the one. And at first it feels like it isn't fair, but I always tell people it's a gift that you can't even explain unless you've been through it. It's such a gift to shepherd somebody through a journey and be by their side. What more important thing do you have to do in your life? Right?
Absolutely.
So if you
Yeah.
love somebody, that's a gift to you, and I promise you'll be such a different person afterwards, and you'll have no regrets, and you can sleep at night, and you can know that you loved that person all the way to their next journey.
Hmm. Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that, and it resonates with a lot of what we've heard about in our own experiences. So I thank you for talking about that as well, Susie.
Sure.
Um, let's see. Let's go into No Country for Old People, because the film starts off basically at an important point that whether we're talking about Alzheimer's or heart failure, cancer, whatever, something that ultimately everyone goes through this stage where, look, we've done our best, we have 24/7 care at home, but it's still not enough. And whether it's wound healing or management of some of these complex diseases, we need something more in terms of skilled
Mhm.
long-term nursing care. And this is sort of where the film starts off with your mother, and it takes place at a very sort of interesting intersection as well, because not just does this occur in your life, but then COVID comes along, which obviously changes the whole nursing situation. Plus, and you talk about the CMS order in terms of all the regulations that were happening. Take us into this time, because you were really had a perfect storm, let's say, brewing. Not just that you were thinking, moving your mother into this care, but very different environment than, I guess, normal. Take us down this path.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. So my mom had already been living at this nursing home, which is a five-star nursing home here in Los Angeles. And it was about the time when I was just in the middle of production with my mom and the girl. So my brother, the thing that he did have was he was the trustee of my mom's trust. That's a whole nother story because we actually were both powers of attorney. My mom had made that, and he decided to change her will to a joint living trust with my stepdad, which was exactly what my mom didn't want. I know that for a fact because she didn't want his children to have her, like, they always kept their money separate. Anyway, that's just, so that those things happen in caregiving too, is where things can, especially when there's finances involved. So as my mom's legal guardian of her person, of her health decisions, I had I had an issue with not being able to even be privy to how much money she had. So 3 months before she was running out of money, my brother let me know and said, "You better find a place for mom." And so I was just devastated. I was like, "Oh my God," because even though I didn't know anything about long-term care, I did know that if you had to put your loved one in a Medicare, or in California, a Medicaid rather, or in California Medi-Cal, facility, that was the worst thing you could do. So I had heard about this five-star facility, and there was a 3-year waiting list to get in, through, and because they had just so many Medicaid or Medi-Cal beds, as they called it.
Mhm.
And so I went in and did a song and dance. And I said, I really need to get my mom in here. And I just did everything I could. And I promised I'd come and play piano every week and sing. And I promised I'd bring Valerie Harper in and we'd do screenings and all those things. And lo and behold, we jumped the line. So I was so happy. I was so happy. Like I thought it was like the best thing I ever did in my life. Like I literally on my podcast said, I think you saw that, and you might have seen that I did like a whole, montage of me saying it's the best decision I've ever made. I got it. I feel so good. It's like getting an Academy Award, and I just assumed I had no clue what was really going on. But and then came COVID. And even when you go to visit, I'd go to visit my mom and I'd think, what? Like, well, first of all, she went from this vibrant human being, walking, talking into, she's suddenly in a wheelchair and she's like a zombie. And it turned out I found out through her doctor that for months, they were giving her Depakote,
Mhm.
which is an anti-seizure drug, but it's actually it's off-marketed to nursing homes. It's very, very common to chemically restrain people. If you have, dementia or Alzheimer's, sometimes you get agitated because you're confused. But more so when we'll get into it, but the business model is based on understaffing. So if you don't have enough staff, the easiest way to take care of your charges is to keep them calm and sedated. Well, that's not a healthy life. It's not a quality life, and it's also not a healthy life for your body. But I didn't know this. I had no idea, and I thought that was a oopsie when they were giving her. I really did think it was an oopsie. Didn't, because you don't want to believe that this is happening on purpose. You don't know. So during COVID, we were kept out and away from our loved ones, many people for up to a year and a half. My mom, it was well over a year. So all we could do was Zoom. And so as the Zooms, when they first started, my mom was always in her chair and very lively, and you could have a conversation with her. And by about, I don't know, the sixth week, she's in bed at 3 in the afternoon, which was our once a week, appointment. And every time I'd say, why is mom, to the CNA who was, helping us set up the Zoom, why is mom in bed at 3 in the afternoon and not dressed? I don't know, Susie. I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy here. And meantime, every day we're getting, you get texts and voicemails that, 14, staff members have tested positive for COVID. They'll be quarantined for 2 weeks, and every day. And you're like, who is taking care of these people? Like, who is taking care of, where is everybody? What is happening? And, that was the curtain that got pulled back, because that was the result of the business model that's been in place for 50 years. So that became, very apparent. And as you see in the documentary, and which I didn't know at the time, I thought this was just specific to my mom's facility. I didn't know that it was a systemic crisis. So, yeah. So was that as far as we go on that question, or?
It's a perfect segue to where I was going next, because yeah,
Okay.
you're pointing out these signals, and again, you talk about them in the movie. Why is mom in bed at 3 in the afternoon? Why do they have this bruise? Why isn't this wound being cared to? And they all start to add up that, hey, there's something wrong. This shouldn't all be happening, and this is where you do a really excellent job of sort of walking through. It's not just a couple bad actors here. This is a systemic problem, and one of the core issues, and you just mentioned it before, and I'd love you to take us down this path. Is just this chronic understaffing, and there was sort of, as I was reading about it and preparing for this episode, and after watching the film, it's this horrible cycle of um, understaffing, low wages that lead to further sort of, it's emotionally demanding enough, but then people quit, and so there's a high turnover, and it sort of feeds on itself.
Yeah.
Talk about chronic understaffing, because this is like really the core of this crisis. There's a lot of other stuff, but what did you learn here?
Okay, let me, may I back it up just a second, just to
Oh,
say
sure.
how I learned this, because I think it's important that people understand that this is, you know, how I became so fascinated with this, and I knew that it was real, and that I needed to pursue this, was because when I was watching a mini series called Dope Sick,
Yep.
right, and I got to the final episode, and this was about the two prosecutors who went after the Sackler family, who are the manufacturers, the owners of Purdue Pharma, who
Yep.
produced OxyContin. So they are responsible. They're horrible, criminal, awful people, and the lead prosecutor Rick Mountcastle was played by Peter Sarsgaard, and at the end of the last episode, they talk about their next case, which is going to be Abbott Labs, which produce oh my God, what is it? What I just told you,
Definitely.
Depakote. They produce Depakote, and they talk about it, and I was like, oh my God, I need to talk to this guy. I need to have him on my podcast. So Rick Mountcastle, the actual federal prosecutor, did come on my podcast. I hunted him down. He came on. He talked about that, and then afterwards, he said to me, you know, what's happening with your mom? Because I was right in the middle of it. It was in 2022, and he said, is not just uniquely your issue. This is a systemic crisis. I have, as a U.S. attorney, federally prosecuted nursing homes for over 20 years, and even winning my case, I have not seen any changes. I've only seen it get worse. And at that point, we became friends, and he said, I'm retiring this year, and I've been dying to know what to do with my 15 minutes of fame off of Dope Sick. And he said, I throw my hat in the ring if you do a documentary on this. So I kind of had no choice but to do a documentary. I thought about it, and when he said he was throwing his hat in the ring, I thought, this is an opportunity I can't pass up, because he had all the skill that I didn't have to do an investigative reporting on this. I could bring the heart to it, and he could make sure that everything was pristine and vetted and correct. And that was most important, because I said, if I do this, because we're talking about billions of dollars in people's
Mm-hmm.
pockets. Do I need do I need to hire a bodyguard? And he said no. He said no. I don't believe this industry, and they do. It is an industry. There's a lobby that supports it, and he said that's not their MO, but they will try to discredit the hell out of you. So I said, okay. So we needed to have everything vetted and, really, really accurate. We didn't want to be, pulled under the carpet for one mistake, because they'll shine the light on that, and then that will discredit everything. So, so when I knew that, that's when I started to really dig in and say, okay, how is this systemic? Why is this systemic? What is the business model? What are we looking at? And that's when I started interviewing all of these experts who have been studying this and advocating for change and transparency for years. So one of my first interviews was with Ernest Tosh in Texas, he's an attorney who is also a very large advocate, and is the head of an association of attorneys, the ASA, who have been, trying to change this business model. He first came to it because he was actually represented going up against criminal, corruption. I mean, that was his specialty. And one of his colleagues said, I have this nursing home case, and there's a lot of financials, and I'm real, it's not in my wheelhouse. Do you think you could take a look at the financials? And so Ernie did, and he said, this is just like, this is like any other criminal operation. This is money laundering and corruption at a corporate level. And it turns out the corporations that have invested in these facilities, they have no transparency. They're veiled. They're legally veiled. So it's basically legal corruption. They've been getting away with it. It's a party for them, and there's so much money to be made off of the pain of other people. And who knew this, right? As I'm learning this, I'm thinking, wow, so this is why there wasn't enough people to even help turn my mom when she finally, was really getting ill from their neglect. Uh, and I would, anyway, so let's go back to the business model. So the business model is really, really, really based on an old model of corruption. And you've got these corporate entities who buy facilities, and then they have these related parties, which are businesses that they own. So they own the real estate, they own the management company, they own the vendors, they'll own, the nursing agency, and they jack up the prices to exorbitant prices, and then and then pay themselves exorbitant fees. And so they'll say to CMS, we can't keep up. We need more money. CMS being the Center of Medicare and Medicaid. And they're the ones that are in control of how much money gets paid out from our tax money, because it's all tax money, all of our money. So they have taken that stand for 50 years. And they also have created a lobby, a very strong nursing home lobby, which is ACA, which is, they are supposedly supposed to be advocating for the nursing home industry, but they're advocating for the industry owners. And so everyone is indebted to the owners. Everyone has to answer to the owners. So the related parties continue to raise their prices. And even if there is traditional advocacy, and even if there is a minimum staffing law that gets passed or a bill, there's no enforcement, there's no oversight, and the penalties are so minor, they're worked into their business model, and they're the cost of doing business.
Yeah, the combination, as you mentioned, with the weak enforcement, outdated model, and yeah, it's a horrible cycle. And it's interesting, throughout the film, you profile more than your story, and there's a lot of other people that there's little snippets here and there, and then shout out to my grade school friend Helena Apotheker, who shows up in the film with her
Yeah.
mother. But can you talk a little bit about that part of it? I mean, how did all these stories come to you? Because there's literally hundreds of them. You sort of weave together at one point in this mosaic. Can you say a little bit about that, and the similarities, I guess, between some of these other situations that you were finding all over the country?
Yeah. So I this was su- this was such a major undertaking for us, because I hit the ground running. My mom, very poetically, she went into the hospital on January 17th of 2022 with a stage 4 pressure wound, which, by the way, is a never event by CMS. Should never happen. It is the poster child for neglect. It
Right.
is the hallmark of neglect, and it is the number one killer in nursing homes, and it's all due to neglect.
And that, just for our audience, 'cause we talked about it, that's a wound that goes down to the bone, right?
Right. When I
Yeah.
first learned about when my mom was admitted into the hospital, 72 hours after you see me talking to her at a visit, during COVID, and she's different than she was before COVID, but she's still sitting up and she's talking to me and laughing, and it's still my mom. And
Right.
then I get a call that she's being taken into the hospital they don't know why, she's just not right, her pressure's down, da da da. And then when the hospital calls me, they tell me that my mom was admitted into the hospital with a stage 4 pressure sore. And they just a note is that the reason why they called to tell me that is because nobody wants to take responsibility for a pressure sore, because everyone knows it's a never event. At the time, I didn't even know what a pressure sore was. When they said pressure sore, I thought it was like, oh, my mom had been leaning on her side or something too long, and it's a boo-boo, right? I literally was that naive not to know. Stage 4, if you get a stage 4 pressure sore, first of all, if you get a stage 1, they should be on it
Right.
right away. To
Yeah.
get to stage 4 is complete neglect. It's also torturous. It's also torturous, and it's inhumane to allow something like that to happen and allow it to stay like that for so long. And when I called her facility back that after I found out what it was, and I said, why wasn't I, told about this? And they said, it didn't happen here. So it must have happened on the way from the facility to the hospital. So when as I started diving into this, so back to your question, how did I get in touch with all these people? When I made the decision to do the documentary, I realized I've done 2 short documentaries before this, and I know how much work they are. And I thought, well, I'm a workaholic. I will get this done because I have this sense of urgency that if other people are suffering like my mom, I need to get this out like now, like yesterday. And I just took our little rogue group of people because nobody wants to talk about nursing home neglect and abuse. It's not fun. It's not anything. It's scary. And it's not sexy, and on and on and on. And on top of it, trying to get a grant, it was nearly impossible because there's, again, what Rick taught me, follow the money. There's a lot of people that provide money for philanthropists to grants who are connected to the industry. So we would, we'd take painstaking time to fill out these grants, and then they'd say we'd be in the finals for it, and then we'd get a letter saying, we regret to tell you we have conflicts, right? So we ended up raising all the money ourselves through a fiscal sponsor, which was the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care. So they became our fiscal sponsor, so that we could do a crowdsource funding and offer tax deductions. So I just started doing research. I just started researching and researching and researching, and anybody that was mentioned in an article, I'd reach out to them. Anybody. I was fearless with that because I really needed to get there. I needed everybody to amplify this. And if there was a story about a family, like the Stewart family, that was in the news. And the Stewart family, it was like, I mean, this was hard for me because I hadn't mourned my mom. My mom died on July 22nd, July 17th, 2022. So it was exactly 6 months to the day after the journey started. And I hit the ground running. I felt like she was with me the whole time because I'm editing footage of her and I'm talking about her. And so she's on my shoulder the whole time. And it gave me the power because I didn't have to, it's almost like I didn't have to mourn her yet.
Right.
So I carried her with me, and I still do right now. I still haven't really mourned her. So but this was extraordinary because every time I find a story about someone, one of the women I saw, it's just a chain effect. It's like I'm on the internet and I see this story from Ron Kim, the assemblyman from New York, who is, he's heading this amplification for elder care in New York because of what happened during COVID. His parents were, if they were afflicted by it as well, affected by it, and he lost his parents during COVID. And he went up against Cuomo during the time, and he was a superstar in my mind. And he was running this Congress meeting about elder neglect, and one of the women that spoke up, one of his constituents, her story was so powerful. So I reached out to her, and I reached out to Ron Kim, and they both are in our documentary. So that's how I did it. And I think because I was so with them, I was so there with them, and their stories meant so much to me, and I respected them, and my heart was in it with them. I had tears. I would cry. I mean, it was difficult. The Stewart family that story broke my heart. It does to this day. What happened to their family was unthinkable. It's unthinkable. So that's how I did it. Just really very much like I hit the ground running and became an investigative reporter, really is what I
Yep.
did. And I keep saying I've never done this in my life in terms of that, but I am a writer. And can I just say that when I started this project, I knew that I had a timeline to follow, which was the kind of the poetic story of my mom's. It was bittersweet, but I used
Right.
that and I wrote it. I wrote the script of the documentary ahead of time, like a 3-act script. So I followed that and then I went and got what I needed to support what had happened to show.
Right.
So I had 4 questions. What happened? How did it happen? Why does it happen? And then how do we fix it?
Yeah, you do a beautiful job of it, and again, um, you take us into some areas, especially as you're mentioning the sort of the issue with the wound, and then this period, this they call it failure to thrive, but the sort of this period near the end where and for people that have never experienced it, it's not unlike it. You can't really describe it. You want to scream at your parent, eat, drink, let's move around, but it's almost like, all right, it's time to step back. um there was two very interesting things at that point. And if you could say a couple words about this, Susie, then I'm going to get to sort of some of the positive stuff and sort of where we potentially are going. But you mentioned one that about the Depakote before, but in this period, sort of this hospice end of life period, you found that your mother was being dosed with fentanyl and Versed, a benzo, which is kind of odd, but whatever. I mean, I'd love to say something about that, but there was something else that popped up, and if you can say a couple words about it, if you like. Your mother, you mentioned at the very end, experienced something that is well documented in the literature, but I guess for people who've never seen it, it can be scary or frightening or whatever. But I believe she experienced something known as terminal lucidity, where you described that at the end he came back, and mom was there and knew you and knew your daughters, and everything was normal. And this is again this mental clarity that comes back in Alzheimer's patients. And could you say a couple words about that? Because again, it's one of those weird things in the scientific literature, but it happens, and something that I guess people should also be prepared for in
Right.
hospice care. And
Well, yeah, to just clarify that a little bit, what was happening was, and it goes back to the business model. When my mom got out of the hospital, they were directed to put her through rehabilitation. They
Mhm.
had intubated her without my permission. She didn't need to be intubated, but when you have Alzheimer's, that is there is ableism that comes into play even in the medical association, and there's ageism in our medical, industry. There's ageism. So people with who have dementia and are older, it's a double whammy, and you're often, you're just dismissed as they are demented and they're old and therefore it's time to go. So and the value of these human beings aren't they're not acknowledged. So what happened was when my mom came back, they had also given her a feeding tube, which she didn't need. My mom was eating fine. My mom lived to eat, like eating. When you get to a certain age, it's food, music, your family, love. It's very simple. You really change what's important to you. And those things are very important. It's important to you. Would you want to not eat for the rest of your life, even if it was 6 months? No, of course not. It's horrible. That's a horrible existence. And so my mom was responsive. And she also needed rehabilitation because as you and I, if we were intubated for that long, we wouldn't be able to talk and it would be hard to swallow. She needed that. They kept saying they wanted her to pass away. And it dawned on me because I kept saying, well, we need a speech therapist. They put her on NPO, which is nothing by mouth. And I'm saying, but my mom is eating, like I'm bringing her, milkshakes and juices and things and she's dying for them. She's so dry, she can't swallow anything. They're saying she's going to aspirate, which means you're going to breathe in the food. It wasn't true, but they wouldn't bring in a speech specialist, which they were supposed to do. That took me over 2 months to get that. And they never brought in a wound specialist. I kept asking them to bring in a wound specialist. And they finally told me that, why don't we put her on hospice and she'll get better care? Well, we don't know about hospice and what's the difference. And all you hear better care and you're like, I'm in, right? I'm in. Well, no, that's just a ticket for them to go. Once they're in hospice, let's just give them as much drugs as possible. And like like Ernie Tosh, the attorney says, it's just slow motion euthanasia. And they do it because it's less resources. It's because morphine is cheap, but resources are expensive. So it becomes a financial situation. My mom, after being on those drugs and me fighting for her to have all the rehabilitation that she wanted and needed, and it's she lived for 6 months like that. That's a long time. That means, I knew, and I kept saying, I am not under any delusion. I know my mom is going to pass away at some point, but let's let her do it on her time. We have let's give her dignity and respect. I know my mom. I'm going to look in her eyes and we communicate, because you can communicate with someone who doesn't have words. We do it with children. We do it with people on the spectrum. We do it all the time. And my mom would smile and laugh. And I can make jokes, and she would laugh. We'd sing. She'd sing with me. And yes, they do get lucidity in Alzheimer's, but this is beyond that, and that does happen a lot. And that's just proof that they're there. And it's not about rallying. You hear about rallying. In other words, when someone's close to death, that all of a sudden they're like, oh, let's go dancing. And then they die. That's a different situation. My mom wasn't rallying. She was trying to save her life. She wasn't ready to go. At the end, when she was ready to go, I saw it. I knew it. And that's why I stayed with her. That's why I was like there. I knew she was going. She was like, done. I'm done. Bye-bye. And I knew it. So I was going to be there with her. But that was different than those moments of lucidity, which you're talking about, right? And I'll say to you, my mom had one of those halfway through the 6 months. I'm yakking away, blah, 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 and talking. And my partner, Dawn, was there. And out of nowhere, and we didn't get it on camera, she just looked at me and went, I love you. Just like that. And I was like, that's my mom. I said, oh my God, Mom, you just ran a marathon, because I know how hard it was. And that was her gift to me. Because she would look up to the right all the time. And I go, oh, you're looking for words, aren't you? You're trying to get those words. You want to get them down. I'm here all day. What do you want to say? And they never came again. But she knew, and she would laugh. But she gave me that gift. And that's the lucidity that you're talking about. Yeah. But you have this industry in hospice. They always have a chaplain. The chaplain came in one day and said to me, your mom is demented and she really doesn't know what's going on. She had holes in her brain. That's what's going. And I was like, they know nothing about Alzheimer's. They literally know nothing. And it's egregious, and it's so unfair to people that are living with dementia and don't want to go. Some people want to go. Other people are enjoying. I would say to my mom before COVID, Mommy, how are you today? And she'd go, I am great. I'm alive. Life is good. The alternative sucks. That's what she'd say. And, but you ask my mom when she was 60, Mommy, what do you want to do when you get older? Don't you dare put me in one of those places. There's a nice little gun in the back room. Don't ever put me in there. But that was her at 60 being, full of her piss and vinegar. And she was just, right. And people's bar changes. It gets different. It changes. Like, little girl, you want to be a princess when you're 20. Well, maybe some of us want to be princesses, but it changes. So it does change. Your bar changes, and suddenly just living is good. Just hearing music is good. Just seeing the people you love is good, and that's okay. So that's what those are the things that we as now this community that I've become a part of are trying to communicate that and amplify those messages to the public who are just like I was and like Helena, who, we all were like that. You don't grow up thinking, oh, the people that are in the health industry are really in the wealth industry. We aren't thinking that. We're thinking that they know better, when in fact they don't.
Susie, well, you mentioned CMS before, and I'm just interested. Obviously, we have a new administration. I don't know much about what's going on. I know I'm here in Philly, and DC's down the road that way. But is there stuff happening sort of on the policy front that we should be aware of, beneficial things that particularly are changing parts of this? And then at the same time, you know, I had a guest on a couple of years ago that was heading up this. There's an initiative in Sweden. It's actually a collaboration between IKEA and Queen Sylvia of Sweden about creating these what they call these dementia friendly communities and towns and so forth. Are there other models that you've seen in other countries, other places that hey, that's worthwhile adopting, and because we got to do something different. I mean,
Oh
we
yeah. I
need a
mean,
new
there
model.
are so many other in the Netherlands. I just posted about this and I literally got 26,000 responses. Is probably the most I've ever gotten on anything, which is this there's a whole program that they put in place for university students who are looking for housing, and they can't afford it, or there's not enough housing, right?
Yeah.
So they are housing them, together with the elderly in long-term care facilities, and all they're asking for is an hour a day of exchange of help, whether it's reading to them, talking to them, feeding them, whatever it is. And it has been such a success. And it's a win-win. It makes so much sense. Like everybody, really gets a positive out of it. It's win-win. They get to have a nice place to stay in, and it becomes a community. And the students love it. And of course, the residents love it. And it's just so smart. It's just so smart. The problem is here, we have this lobby that's just lobbying to keep everything status quo. And there are a lot of there's so many, listen, I'm so involved in this community of advocacy, and there are a lot of groups that have been around well more than me that have, like, there's the greenhouse, that where they have this whole, it's person-centered care. And then there's the Eden Project, which is similar to the Greenhouse Project. And then there's quite a few, and I talk about them in the documentary, that are all good models, but they can't get supported by CMS. They're not supported, so they have to be privately paid for. And many people at that stage of their life don't you have run out of their income, because if the longer you live, you're going to deplete your income at some point. So that's the problem with these wonderful programs, is that they can't really be initiated for everybody. And then who is overseeing those projects, and what's to stop somebody who is one of the corporate entities from saying, yeah, we're going to slap on, we're a greenhouse, or we're the Eden Project, but they're not following their protocol. And because we don't know as a society, as a public, what that even means, how do we make proper decisions? So the way the system is, we can't really put those into the system and rely on that like they can do in the Netherlands or in Switzerland, that's such a great idea. Yeah, why, their corporate entities are doing good with their money, like IKEA, whereas, we have the opposite. So I just want to say that we have, when it comes to advocacy, and this is where this is our biggest hurdle, is that traditional advocacy doesn't work. Like I said, if you pass a bill, there's a bill that I've been helping support, that this in the second round, it was turned down. It makes no sense not to pass it. It's the Essential Caregiver Act, and
Mhm.
it allows one person who to be essential caregiver during an emergency, like a pandemic, because all family members were kept out, and from through all excuses like, oh, they're going to bring disease in. Well, no, actually the people that worked there brought disease in, because there was nobody watching the hen house. Nobody
Yeah.
was. People, if you see videos of my mom, like, you've got CNAs with no mask on, masks below their noses. They could have provided family member, well, at least one family member, with proper PPE. And by the way, they would have been extra eyes there, and it would have been better, because they would have been saying they're more vested in the health of their loved one than the people working there, right? So it would have been a win-win. Anyway, the point is that it's going through its second round and of getting endorsements and so on and so forth. Even if it passes, and I hate saying this, it's like, who's going to enforce it?
Yeah.
Who's there to say, oh yeah, you must let these people in? Who will do that? We don't have that. We don't have that infrastructure. We just don't. And we have lobbyists who have seats in the legislature who make these decisions. So we really need to pull the curtain back as a population, as a culture, as a community, as a collective. And like, for me, like, the only way we can create a change that is substantial, that is authentic change and not performative change, is to demand change as a collective, as constituents, because that's our currency that we have. So halfway through the documentary, Rick Moncastle said, what is our call to action? That's a big question, right? What is the call to action? So here I am, 4 years later, and we just launched ROAR, which is a grassroots movement, of 501c3 nonprofit, standing for Respect, Oversight, Advocacy, and Reform for Long-Term Care. And our whole mission is using story
Mm-hmm.
to change, because that's the only way we're going to touch people outside of our echo chambers.
Mm-hmm.
People, like I said earlier, nobody wants to hear about nursing homes and older people and that story. And I say it a lot in the documentary, this isn't my story, this is all of our stories, because aging is an equal opportunity situation. And honestly, in the way that the system is now, you should be afraid of it. You should be afraid of it. And so through ROAR, we're hoping to galvanize and educate all the generations, because my children's generation will inherit this problem.
Yeah.
And so we need to stop it. We need to stop it. It's been going on for 5 decades. We need to stop it already. And they really, this is a harsh thing, but they are warehousing the most vulnerable people to bill off of them like widgets. And that is not who we are as human beings. This is a human rights situation. It's not, it really is. And that I just think that once we can get that message across from your heart, and create some empathy, I think that we will have a chance to make a bigger change, and a faster change, and a real change. And I mean, we had Jane Fonda endorsed our documentary, as did
Oh,
Lily
yes. Well,
Tomlin, and I went to see her at a seminar that we were at, and she's now not only is this 88-year-old firecracker, she's heading the climate pact, and she's she's put some new life into a movement that her father started in 1947. Democrats for democracy. And so now she's got that one. She's doing two at the same time. And basically it's like she really echoed what I felt, was that we need to speak up. And as storytellers, as artists, We stand at the front line of change and always have. And no change has ever been made without a small group of people coming together and really starting it. So that's my hope, and I'm gonna see it through. And that's what I wanted to happen, because it has to change already. It just has to. What's going on is just awful. And it's not just older people. If you have a disability where you are reliant on long-term care, you're just as vulnerable. So by the grace of God, go all of us.
Absolutely.
Am I
Well, you do
preaching
a
too much, everybody? I'm so
no,
sorry.
it's
I
amazing. I'm
talk so
glad you
seriously all the time, but it's like I'm very
no,
much passionate about it, and I think everybody should. And please, and I'm not like, I really am not like a conspiracy theorist or any, I am Pollyanna. You're looking at Pollyanna, like everything should be good and happy and sweet. And I had to really, take a good look and say, this is actually happening.
yeah, I mean it's no conspiracy. I mean, everyone I've ever talked to that's been through this window, it's there. Yeah, I've never not heard a story, in all these cases. And again, you do an extremely elegant job of telling this story. I'm glad you brought up Roar, and we'll put the link to that as well, in the show notes. But yeah, I mean, it's what you're doing is so needed, Susie. It's beautiful the way you're going about it. Is there anything else coming up in 2026, these first couple months as we're in the new year, that we should know about? Whether they're talks you're going to be giving, other projects that are public facing, anything else that I missed while we have you today, please?
Oh, okay. Well, our I've done a lot of talks and a lot of conferences, and I do have some more scheduled. We're also planning, but you can go to the Roar website now. I've
Okay,
got everything up there on our press and what's
perfect.
upcoming thing on that page, which we just finished that website, which is roar4ltc.org. And we are so what we're planning right now is a national walk for awareness on September
Mhm.
13th, which is Grandparents' Day, national, one in each state, so that everybody will know that there's a problem, not just the advocates and people who have already been in it. We want everyone to know. We want it to be, like I said earlier, kumbaya. Like we want everyone to know. And can I just tell you one statistics that is,
Sure.
and it's in the documentary, but I always tell people this because it's so it's shocking. And Mike Wasserman, Dr. Mike Wasserman, is in our documentary, says
Mhm.
this. During COVID, over 200,000 people died in nursing
Yeah.
homes before their time. Some of them were frontline workers, most of them were residents. And I asked the question, did how many were alone when they died? And he said, all of them. That is a tragedy. And when you think about that number, the size of that number, that's 6 times as many that in from 9/11. This is a huge amount of loss. And so I just want people to think about that number. I mean, that's a war. And it just can't believe it's happening in our country, and that we're just doing la la la. So I know it's a downer, but we're going we're going
Sobering.
it's sobering for sure. And which is why comedies are always on my list to watch. But come on, if we can change this, how great will you feel? Come be a warrior with us.
I
Join
like
the
that.
warriors, and let's be loud and make changes. It's important, and you'll feel so good about yourself, and you'll feel so good to make your life and everyone that you love's life better.
Mhm. Absolutely.
And that's it.
Again, amazing work, Susie. We will help you get the message out there, but really, really impressive what you've done here. Again, for everybody. out there that is going to be listening to this episode across the various podcast networks, or who will be watching on the YouTube channel. You've been spending time with Susie Singer Carter. The name of the film, No Country for Old People. The name of the organization, Respect, Oversight, Advocacy, Reform for Long-Term Care, also known as ROAR. We will put all the links in the bio. But Susie, I really want to thank you for taking the time out today to come talk to us about everything you've been up to. Obviously, thank you for everything you've been doing on the issues of elder care reform in our country. And as we like to say here on our show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow for people via what you do. Really an awesome story. We'll help spread the word. And I really look forward to continue to follow your work.
Wow, Ira, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
It was really great having you.